Hello lovely people, hello book lovers and lovers of book lovers. How are you all doing today? I hope you are well, I hope you're cosy, and I hope you've been enjoying some fabulous books over the last few weeks or so. I have. I've got 3 to share with you today, which are all, not only are they very different from each other, but they're also quite different in terms of my normal reading, because there are 2 fictions in there. 2 of them, the 2 fiction, are part of my treats for a tenner. Yay! So when I have my treats for a tenner and I buy books, it's a kind of like a, I don't care, laissez-faire, I don't care what I buy, let's have something completely different. And if I hate it, you know what, it doesn't matter. It's that little one-off Christmas present to myself of have something. Try something new. So the first one of those is the beautiful, let me show you close, The Cat Who Saved Books by, I'm going to have to read it again, Sosuke Natsukawa. Sosuke Natsukawa. It just looks like Rusty the allotment cat, doesn't it? Just a very short little book. I'm not sure whether this is aimed at adults or children. I think both could read it. Not really young children. There are lots of references in there to books which they probably wouldn't know of. But actually, even if you didn't know all the books that are mentioned in there, it wouldn't spoil your enjoyment. I quite enjoyed going through it thinking, yeah, read it. I haven't read Proust. So, in essence, it's the story of a young boy. Do we know how old he is? Maybe he's 13, 12 or 13. And his grandfather owns a bookshop, a long, thin bookshop with books piled high to the ceiling on both sides. His grandfather, at the start of the book, his grandfather has just died. So this young boy, is he going to go off and live with his aunt? He doesn't have parents. So it's essentially, in terms of characters, he's the central character. Another character comes along, which is one of the girls from school. She's coming to drop off homework and is a bit concerned about him, and they become friends, and the cat. Now, the thing about the boy is, I can't remember, there's a Japanese word for it, about this kind of sort of locked in type of person, a person who sort of shuns the world, wants to just stay in the bookshop, doesn't really mix with other people. So that's sort of key in the story. So there are 3 central characters: the boy from the bookshop, the girl who brings him his homework, and the cat. And I have to say, as soon as I started reading it, perhaps because it's Japanese, in my mind was seeing it as a Studio Ghibli animation. I know some of you will be familiar with the animation of Studio Ghibli. And just to say, because as soon as I was reading it, that's what I was thinking. And it brought up a conversation from some time ago about the correct pronunciation. Is it Studio Ghibli or Studio Ghibli? So I looked it up. The Japanese would say Studio Ghibli. Us Europeans, we'd probably say Ghibli, but they say Ghibli. So that's how I was imagining it. And that's why I think in terms of reader age, maybe it could be a younger person. So off he goes. Right, how to put it? The book is essentially allegorical. It's sort of almost like the 6 labours of Theseus, with our boy sent off on these missions. Because right at the beginning, the cat appears in the shop, and the cat can talk. The cat's a magical cat. So there are 3 main missions where our young boy has to go. I don't want to give too much away, but basically he walks to the end of the shop, and the end of the shop doesn't end. It carries on, and he walks, and he ends up in another place, another world. And on each of the 3 missions, books are somehow being abused. There's a sort of a main evil person in each setting, and that evil person is damaging books, is being horrible to books, is being cruel to books. And of course, books are a sort of a metaphor for humans. So that sort of, that mistreating of them and not respecting them, etc., etc. And so, of course, our young hero has to try and convince the evil person to stop being horrible to books, humans. It's a very simple premise. It's a sort of premise of, you know, pushing aside, getting rid of cynicism in order to be open to loving life, loving people, being true to oneself, speaking one's truth, being truthful with other people, kindness, empathy, and also the idea that books actually teach us empathy. The very nature of reading a book, we put ourselves into someone else's shoes, into the main character's shoes. We live and we see through their eyes whilst we're in the book. So yes, there's all those themes about, put it this way, that's what the themes were about for me. That's how I read it, that the mistreatment of books is actually about human beings, and let's be truthful with one another, let's be kind with one another. There are references to being able to slow down in order to notice things and find moments of joy. That was really lovely. Hang on, what else did I write? This idea that we're all trying to cram too much into our day. Slow down, be in the moment. Yes, speaking our truth, etc., etc. I think one of the main things I felt about the book, even as I was reading it, once I'd finished it, yes, but even as I was reading it, was it's the sort of book that I think it's going to be different for everybody to some degree. It's the sort of book that our own state, our state of mind or state of heart when we're reading it, will inform what comes out of the book. I think that's true for, you know, pretty much any book, but especially one that's so obviously allegorical as this one is. It's a sweet book, it's a charming book. I sort of enjoyed it. It's like I'm not raging and raving about it, because for me, in some ways, excuse me. Sorry, I didn't mean to slurp. Yeah, it's a little bit simplistic in many ways. You know, truth versus lies, good versus bad, empathy versus cynicism, if you like. So it's a little bit simplistic, and also, I don't know, maybe my days of reading sort of magical stuff, fantasy, however you want to describe it, maybe my days of reading that are over. That didn't really grab me. What I did enjoy was, it's an incredibly visual book. So back to that Studio Ghibli thing, incredibly visual. The different places, I'm not going to say lands, but yeah, the different places he ends up having to do battle to save the books, they're so beautifully written that yes, I can see it. So I think for me, I think if it was an animation, if it was a Studio Ghibli, I think I would prefer that over the book. As a book reading experience, I can take it or leave it. Whatever. To be really inarticulate. Yeah, it was a bit of a, well, okay, yeah, it was okay. You know, the writing is okay, the characters, everything about it is okay. It didn't blow my socks off. But visually, what I ended up with in my own head did blow my socks off. So, you know what, if you see a copy, give it a go. You might have a completely different response to it than me, because of wherever you're at in your life when you happen to read it. But I enjoyed the cat. I did enjoy the cat, and considering I'm not a cat person, I also am not a cat person. I've turned into one, I think. But yeah, I thoroughly enjoyed the cat character. And that's what I say about the visual thing. I'd love to see that cat character brought to life in an animation. It cost me, how much did that one cost me? Was it £1? I think it cost me £1. It kept me entertained for, it's a quick read, maybe 3-4 hours, like an afternoon. It kept me entertained one rainy, yet another rainy afternoon, evening. So I'm glad I bought it. I'm glad I stuck my neck out and thought, oh, I'll try something new. Because if nothing else, it's reminded me of how much I love Studio Ghibli and that all of that kind of anime. So now, after finishing it, I thought, oh, next time I'm in the second-hand place, I'm going to look at their DVDs and see if there's any animation to look at. But as a book, yeah, I can take it or leave it. Okay, so next in my treats for a tenner, I got The Animals of Lockwood Manor by Jane Healey. I was attracted to it because it begins in 1939. It's the start of, well, it's just before the start of the Second World War. And at the Natural History Museum in London, they are evacuating the exhibits. I'm sure this was happening in all sorts of museums and galleries all over London and in other major cities. Evacuate the exhibits to the countryside to keep them safe because almost certainly London is going to get bombed. So I'm into the Natural History Museum. It's a period of history that I am interested in. And it on the back cover is this idea that they get taken to this manor house, this huge, vast country pile, but maybe there's something a bit wrong there. And I thought, ooh, that sounds right up my street. So that's where we start. We start with the evacuation of the stuff to Lockwood Manor, and the rest of the book is set at Lockwood Manor. Two main characters, Hetty, who is the curator at the museum, who travels with the exhibits to Lockwood Manor and stays there for duration of the war. And then Lucy, who is the lady of the house. Well, she's the daughter of the lady. The lord of the manor, you know, Sir Lockwood, is her dad. His wife and his mother have both been killed in a car crash, so it's just him and his daughter Lucy. So Lucy and Hetty are our two main characters, and they sort of alternate chapters. Not quite. Lucy will have a chapter and then Hetty will have 4 or 5 chapters, and then we hear Lucy's voice again. And I like that as a device. I like hearing the thoughts of both of our main characters. But the big character in this book is the house itself. And I think she sets it up brilliantly, Jane Healey. You do feel straight away, this is a spooky place. What is going on? It's vast. There's a red room, a blue room, a yellow room, long corridors, doors that are locked. You can't get into that room. What's in that room? A door that's open. What's in that room? There's nothing in the room. It's brilliantly set up that this house is spooky. It made me think straight away, almost, really. It made me think of a combination of 3 classics. Dracula, which is just one of the best books ever written of all time. It's one of the scariest, spookiest books to read under the covers at night. So it made me think a bit of Dracula and that idea of the building itself being ominous, malevolent perhaps. It also made me think of Jane Eyre. Is there someone mad locked upstairs? And it also made me think of Rebecca, the Daphne du Maurier book, a modern classic, because the character of Mrs. Danvers in Rebecca is like, she's just evil. Housekeeper in this, it's like, ooh, the servants, the staff, the housekeeper. Have they all got something against Hetty? Are they all, angry at her invasion of the house with all these stuffed animals? And of course, all the stuffed animals also, they're like the 5th character. If we've got Lucy, Hetty, the lord of the manor, and the staff, the stuffed animals, and then the house. The house is definitely a character in this book. So it starts with much promise. There's one line I wanted to read. Right, the very first chapter is from Lucy, that's the lady of the manor. And she's musing about the arrival of all the exhibits from the museum. She says, a population feathered, furred, beaked, hooved, ruffed, clawed and taloned would soon lodge here. And when the rooms were occupied again, when they had a purpose, and when they were full to bursting, my mind would settle again, and the house would settle again. No more empty, echoing rooms, no more bad nerves, no more ghosts. I was sure of it. What a cracking start. What a cracking start. So Lucy has nerves, and that's what I mean about the kind of that, you know, the madness. Where has that madness come from? So great premise it starts with. And then it goes downhill. Unfortunately, yeah, it just didn't do it for me. It becomes incredibly repetitive. It's like, yeah, we get it. Something spooky's going on. I think, I can't even remember now, but I think it covers about 2 years. But it all feels like it's in the first week. It just feels like we never really, there's no pace and there's no kind of winding up of that kind of tension and the fear. We want it to wind and wind and wind and wind, and then we want to be released at the end. The tension is set right from the beginning. The pace is set right from the beginning, and they simply don't change. Yeah, really disappointing. And as far as endings go, yeah, really disappointing. The way she writes about the house, giving it its creepiness, I really liked within the first sort of quarter of the book or so. Really liked it. And I thought, oh, I'm in for a treat now. And I was even getting a little bit, I was reading it late at night and I was getting a bit spooked out. I was like, oh, what's going on? Maybe I should put it down and read it tomorrow in the daylight. And kept reading. But like I said, it just never progresses from there. It doesn't really build to any sort of denouement. And yeah, the end, it's unsatisfying. Look, I think it's like, it's a new take on chick lit. I think if you were sitting on the beach bored, you might enjoy it. But, you know, I referenced a second ago Dracula, Jane Eyre and Rebecca. 3 great works of fiction. This, a great work of fiction, is not. But again, you know, I got that one for 50p in my treats for a tenner. I'm glad I did. I'm glad I read it. But put it this way, I read it. It's got to be. It's getting chilly suddenly. It was about maybe 2 weeks ago, and just before turning the camera on, I had to go back into the book to look up the names of the characters because I'd forgotten already. Never mind. You know, if you don't try, you don't know, do you? And I think it's one of the joys of reading is when you find a really good book, wow, it really impacts. But all books, you know, for however long you're reading it, they're entertaining in some way or other, aren't they? I got to the end of Lockwood Manor. Lockwood Manor, is it? Yeah. And I did think, I haven't got them on my shelf anymore though, I did think, oh, I could do with reading Dracula now, or Jane Eyre, or Rebecca. Never mind. My last book today though is, it is an absolute treat. Sorry, I had to blow my nose. Yeah, it's an absolute treat. Spring Rain by Marc. Ooh. This was such a beautiful gift. Thank you, Rocky. Oh. Well, you might tell from my tone going a bit quieter, a bit down, a bit gentle. This is a really beautiful, gentle little book. Again, I call it a little book because it is little as in short, but it's it's about minutiae. Marc Hamer, it's Speak Vivi, it's autobiographical. He's the writer, it's about his life. Another one with chapters alternating. One chapter will be about him when he's a little boy. Starts when he's about 7 or 8, I would guess. And then the other chapter is him as the old man. I mean, he's not that old. I think he's in his 70s. I don't think we ever find out. But yeah, so the chapters alternate between this little boy and the old man. Right from the outset, he writes about the little boy in the third person. So he's describing. So in the old man chapters, he says, I see this, I saw that, I feel this, I felt that. When it's the little boy, it will be, he saw something, he felt something. And it's an interesting device that he actually comes back to towards the end of the book, about how in this great length of life where so much has happened, when he thinks back to being that little boy, it is almost like it's a third person. He almost can't reconcile these two people. How did that little boy become this old man? How is this old man connected to that little boy? So the little boy chapters, I say chapters, they're really short. You can tell it's a short book, but they might be sort of 4 or 5 pages long. And each time he has a chapter, as the book progresses, he gets old. He gets to about sort of 16 or 17 in those chapters. So, without doubt, he has a rough start in life. Actually, I want to read something that's on the back. It says, "This is a story about the rain, a boy, an angry dog, and a gardener, and how some of them find peace and freedom." He has a rough start in life. He has an absolute thug, brute of a father who makes his life miserable in terms of sort of jobs and an itinerant life. He ends up homeless at one point. It's all like, it's pretty awful stuff. But the old man who's writing in his present day, today as the old man, straight away, I completely fell in love with him, with his soul. The most beautiful, gentle soul one can imagine. Simple little things. Finding joy in those simple moments. It's so much as I live my life. I was reading it and thinking, he's writing my words apart from the childhood and the brutish father. But I identified with so much he was writing about. There's a real spare quality to his writing. It almost makes it like poetry. But he observes things so minutely. Looking at a ladybird opening its wings, how does it do that? And the surge of joy he feels just observing this tiny, tiny life and understanding, that's how it does it with its wings. Observing people coming out of a train station, the colour of someone's scarf against their jacket collar, the sound of their feet on the pavement. The rain has just begun. Does that change the sound of their feet on the pavement? These tiny, tiny, almost minuscule observations. He has a precision with his words that's remarkable. I don't mean, by precision, I don't mean something that's hard and angular and cold. But every word is the perfect word in that moment, so that the shortest, most simple sentence, there's an immediacy about it. What a beautiful man. What a beautiful man. Some of the other stuff on the back says, a wonderful book about our relationship with the earth, with other animals, and with our own troubled humanity. So he becomes a gardener. And in a way, it's sort of, like I said, he's only in his 70s, but he's very much kind of reflecting at the end of his life, towards the end of his life. He's in his old age. He's reflecting on all the beauty in life. the simple pleasures there are to be had in life. And it's so gorgeous because he could easily have turned into a really bitter, cynical, nasty person after that start in life. But he hasn't let that affect him. He keeps finding beauty. It's just delicious. A fascinating lyrical account of the loneliness and beauty of life on the margins, on how to live, how to be calm and content with only a little in a quietly humming garden. So throughout the 70-year-old, he has finally retired from gardening, and he's starting to make his own garden. The garden that will be the garden that he enjoys for the rest of his life, for the rest of his days, however long his life will be. But he's making a garden which will be a garden which doesn't need a lot of tending. You know, he recognises, I'm getting older, my knees are hurting. It's a garden that he's making that is almost like he's giving the garden back to nature, whether that be the plants, the insects, the birds. Oh, it's gorgeous. I'm not really making much sense, am I? It's an incredibly moving book. Not like sob moving, but joy moving. I smile. I can feel that my cheeks aching thinking about it again. I smiled so often, but it's gentle. Everything about this book is gentle. The joy isn't sort of like woohoo joy. It's like, oh, joy. The beauty he observes isn't like, wow, it's amazing and beautiful. It's more, oh, that's so beautiful. It's incredibly tender as well. I think that's the main thing, is it's tender. If I had read this before the end of 2023, it would have been in my top 5 reads for 2023. I didn't read it in 2023, I read it just into this year, so who knows, maybe at the end of this year with everything else I've read, I've got a strong feeling that this is going to be in my top 5. My voice went a bit shaky then. I was moved by it and humbled by it, because that's what I mean, to have such a rough start in life, but to be able to be such a beautiful soul later on is remarkable, actually. A huge thumbs up for Spring Rain by Marc. He has written a couple of other books, and he talks in this about, I think, does he mention that this is probably the last book he'll ever write? I hope he writes something else. He has written 2 other books, one, How to Catch a Mole, and the other, Seed to Dust. So I'll look out for those. I'd love to read more of his writing. The very first chapter? Double check. Oh, and there's little illustrations out, because he trained at art school as well. This is his little self-portrait of him as a boy. An Adventure at Sea, Treasure Island, A Little Wooden Hut. In that first chapter, he had me gripped, because the little boy, his family, they've moved again. This garden is just horrible. It's a dirt patch. It's chucking with rain. There's a little shed at the end of the garden, and he decides to set sail. He sets sail in the baby bath across the garden in the rain, and it's just so, we can all picture it, I'm sure, gorgeous. And then he gets into the shed, and what does he find in the shed? Well, one of the things he finds in the shed is an encyclopedia, Britannica or not, I don't know, and this whole world opens up to him through reading. And it's probably saved him, actually. So right from the beginning, we're enthralled. I adored that little boy. I adored the old man. I want to spend time with him. I got to the end of the book and I thought, he's the kind of chap I'd love to just sit next to in the garden. We don't have to say anything. Just sit side by side on a bench, being, observing, and seeing joy and beauty everywhere. Amazing man. Marc Hamer, you're amazing, and so's your book. So yeah, definitely give it a read if you can get yourself a copy. It came out last year. I've just double checked. I think it was 23. It was published. yeah, published in 2023, so it's only just out, but hopefully your local library might have a copy. I'm keeping this one. There's a lot of books like those previous two I shall just give back to the charity shop. This one is to be treasured and probably, almost certainly, read again. I might read it again once I've moved house and I'm starting to make my own little garden. I'm supposed to be shutting up just very quickly. As I was reading it and he's creating his garden, I was thinking, yes, that's the sort of garden I want to create when I move and I've got my very own garden again for the first time in 20-something years. So yeah, I think it's definitely going to be reread once I've moved house and I'm dreaming my own new garden. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful, gentle, tender, joyous, perfect. All right, lovelies, that's it for today's books. I'm just looking over there because there's another two I've just finished, but they will come in a while. They will come in a while. The next video will be something else. No idea what. It might even be, we might even be in the kitchen. Who knows? I don't know, but there will be something coming soon. So I'll see you then. But for now, happy reading. And look, if you read something and it's not your cup of tea, either just get rid of it straight away, give it to a friend, or like with those two that I wasn't that impressed with, I did read to the end. They weren't long books, they weren't difficult books. So I thought, well, I've got them, I might as well read them to the end to then properly form an opinion. But there are some, there was one, I had a book of short stories that were all sort of Christmas short stories. Read the first two, rubbish, went straight back to the charity shop. They were too short, they just didn't engage me. And that was one of those occasions where I say life is too short to persevere with a book that I'm not enjoying when there's a whole world of books out there to enjoy. And I've got some of them on my shelf. So yeah, bye-bye. Anyway, right, that's it. See you all again really soon for something else. But yeah, happy reading and happy swapping and sharing books with your friends and happy browsing at your libraries. Cheerio.